Is everybody on board now?
I believe so.
Okay. If I have a problem, I'll just have to speak on the phone, I guess. For some reason, my video is having a problem.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you figure it out later on, that's fine too.
Okay.
Well, let's just start. Thank you, everyone, for good morning, and thank you, everyone, for joining this morning for this call. It's with a lot of gratitude. I welcoming Thomas Shin of Bain. He's a senior partner there and has been there for many, many years, which he'll give a more formal introduction. As Tom said, we're also expecting Andy Choi, CEO of Amplify, and we also have on the line, I believe, Dr. Jeffrey Rowe, CEO of IntuitiveX. And that's in Seattle, which is also great to see because that's where my family is at the moment. Unfortunately, separated by COVID, but it's a place that I also really enjoy going to. So I met Tom a little while ago and through a friend in Singapore, and I've asked him to just hold this very brief webinar because I believe he just has a lot of experience and a lot of things to say and to share from all his experiences. And let me just start this screen share. There we go. And yeah, one of the things that we discussed is I think one of his passions is obviously with business and management and strategy, but he's been working on a lot of things regarding commercialization between Korean companies and the US markets as well. So, well, before I keep going, I'll just turn it over to Tom and let him give an introduction about himself as well as how the session came to be and how we can share or how they can share their experiences of how of what they've had in the last several decades, really. So over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. It's really nice meeting all of you. Peter and I have been talking on and off about some of the things I've been working on. And, you know, when I mentioned what I've been doing, he was quite interested in seeing if he can hook up some of the companies. Before I start, I want to do a very quick introduction for myself and Jeff and another gentleman will be joining, Andy. I'm currently a current partner at Bain Company. I was born in Korea, went to the US at 10. I came back to Korea in 1995, and I've been living here and doing consulting work since then. So I've been in Korea for 25 years. It's been traditional work, but you know, as I'm transitioning into, I guess, my second phase of my career, I wanted to do something quite interesting rather than trying to help large conglomerates make more money. And for me, the passion I have is in healthcare, because at the end of the day, the end user actually has a benefit. It gives me great pride and satisfaction in helping firms really improve the lives of others. In so doing, I got connected with a company called IntuitiveX, and Dr. Jeffrey Rowe talked to you more about what they're trying to do and why I was interested, and I'll get through that. So I've been working with IntuitiveX since about 4 years ago, and we're developing a very interesting model. And the whole point of today's, can somebody put that on mute, please? I have a ringing. Yeah. So the whole point of today's presentation is not to provide you a solution or answer. Let's say we can link you with an investor. I have made observations that there's a huge gap where Korean startups are and where they need to be. And I just want to address that. And much of that is commercialization. There are 3 pillars. One is the product itself. The second is access to funding. But the third thing is how do you commercialize? And it's especially daunting if you're in a regulated space like medical field, medical devices, diagnostic tools and such. That's where IX has been focusing on. So I am not here to give you answers to all your issues, but more of an experience sharing session of what we have observed along our journey. And we ourselves are a startup firm as well. And so we're not quite there, but we'd like to explain what we're trying to do. And if it kind of rings a bell as to needs you might have, and that doesn't mean you need to work with IX, but you need to kind of find the kind of capabilities IX has. And that's what we want to share with you today. Before I go back and study a little further, let me give the time to Jeffrey. Maybe you can do a brief introduction for yourself before we jump in.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Yes.
My name is Jeff Rowe. 노승현입니다. I was born in Seoul, South Korea, and immigrated to the States just like Tom. But I when I was 5 years old, and my family moved to the Seattle area. I grew up in Seattle. I don't know what your connection to Seattle is, Peter. Do you grow up in Seattle, or do your family settle in Seattle?
Yes, my family did settle in Seattle, and I went to University of Washington there. So they're all still there, and yeah.
What year did you
my
graduate?
sisters, 96 from
Wow. Okay.
Seattle. Oh,
So
sorry, University of Washington.
I graduated 3 years before you in 93 at UW.
Oh wow,
Crazy.
small world. Yeah.
Wow. Really small world. Did you go to high school in Seattle area too?
In Washington D.C. area, actually,
Okay.
in Virginia.
Got it.
And then, that's when my parents moved over to Seattle. So
Okay. Got it. Makes a lot of
Seattle's
sense.
a very special place, and my family absolutely loves it. And my parents spent half their time in Seoul and half in Seattle, and absolutely love it.
Is that right? That's what my father-in-law does too, actually. Before COVID.
Yes.
Oh, we have another. We have 3 UW grads here. What's going on here?
My son went to UW.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's a Seattle connection. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I went to I went to grade school, junior high, high school in the Seattle area, and then went to UW for undergrad. Oh, there's another UW grad.
Another one.
That is insanity. Oh my gosh, that is so crazy. So then I went to med school and did most of my medical training in the Midwest and East Coast. And then I came back to Seattle after my fellowship training in New York about 15 years ago. So I've been here ever since. Along the way, ended up getting an MBA also at UW, and then most recently got a master's in technology management, because
It's at the bottom. It's at the bottom.
Sorry, at the
of
bottom.
the invite.
What was that, Tom? Oh, so ended up getting a master's of science and technology at Columbia University. Most recently, so IntuitiveX is a life science consultancy and incubator we started about 4 years ago, and it was a result of some of the pain points that I experienced as an entrepreneur. So just give you a little bit of background. I developed some intellectual property regarding a minimally invasive way to place in surgical implants through a laser-guided approach, minimally invasively. Did some cadaveric labs and studies, and published a paper, presented it at a meeting, and then during that process, I went around to different companies, and then had a lot of struggles trying to find someone that would be interested in that IP. Finally ended up at a company called Stryker Corporation, which is a top 3 orthopedic and spine company in the US and internationally. And then they subsequently placed me on 3 separate surgical design and innovation teams, where I helped them to take open surgery platforms, which means that you do these surgeries through big incisions, and then did it through small, minimally invasive incisions. And that's how I actually met Andy. And I don't think Andy's on the line just yet, but Andy and I met each other when he was an engineer and when I was a surgeon. And so we worked together, and then finally we sort of came back full circle, and a few years later, and started IntuitiveX. So yeah, as Tom mentioned, what we typically do is we take ideas from concept to commercialization, and it could be at the ideation phase, it could be at the prototype phase, it could be test and validation phase, it could be through it could be a little bit more mature. What we found in working with Tom, Tom and we got acquainted probably about 2-3 years ago, and since that time, Tom has been really instrumental in connecting us through two Korean-based startup companies in the life sciences that are thinking about commercializing in the U.S. Because as you all probably know, the pathway to commercialization is very different in the US versus Korea. So we help to try to simplify that process for the companies, and we try to give them guidance regarding how to actually get from point A down to point Z. So it's a pleasure to meet all of you, and I'm excited to hear more about the companies that you have in your group as well. There's Andy.
Is Andy on board?
Great timing.
Good timing. We're just going through introductions. Andy, if you can just take just 3 minutes to give you a background so everybody can understand.
Sure. Nice to meet you. Andy Choi, CEO and co-founder of Amplify Surgical, and also a co-founder and board member at IntuitiveX, the medical device incubator. I have a degree in mechanical engineering from Berkeley, and then an MBA from Rutgers. I spent about 20 years in the device industry, mainly in the orthopedic and spine industry. I started off as an engineer for a company called Stryker. It's a Fortune 500 medical device company based out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And then I proceeded on to marketing and sales within Stryker. And then for the last 10 years, and then I spent about 10 years at Stryker, and I left Stryker to join my first startup here in Southern California called Vertiflex. I stayed there for about 4 years, and that company got bought by Boston Scientific for $465 million. It was a nice exit. And then I moved on to another company called Ellipse Technologies, and I was the VP of engineering and biz dev for that company. And that company got acquired by NuVasive, based out of San Diego, for $410 million. So I have about 2 or 3 decent exits, luckily, to speak of. And then shortly after that, I partnered with Dr. Jeffrey Rowe and a few other partners up in Seattle to co-found IntuitiveX, the incubator. And then a few years after that, I stepped aside for a bit to go full-time in one of the portfolio companies called Amplify Surgical, which I'll speak more of later today. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. So let me tell you a little bit of how I got connected with IntuitiveX, and then some of the things I have observed. I was introduced to IntuitiveX by my brother-in-law, who's also a neurosurgeon in Seattle. And apparently, a lot of these Korean American surgeons have Kakao Talk, and they talk amongst themselves. And a lot of them actually lead a lot of these orthopedic departments, universities. And apparently, if enough of them see a product that's applicable in their field and they like it, they actually pull the money and invest in these companies. One of those companies was Amplify when it just got started. My brother doesn't know anything about business, but he plunked down $200,000 because other doctors were doing it. He called me because Andy was visiting Korea, and he will tell you why Amplify is connected to Korea, and to kind of have a meeting with him to see if he made a good investment. And when I sat down with Andy and listened to the business model, I asked, do you have active activities in Korea other than Amplify right now? And he said, not yet. They're focused mainly in the US. And I thought it would be worthwhile to really see if there's a need for Korean startups to really get an integrated view and help in the commercialization. So I invited Andy over a couple of months later. And we did a whole roadshow and meeting, pharmaceutical companies, Korean VCs, large corporations, and so forth. And to my surprise, there was very high interest. And in fact, one of the pharmaceutical companies was interested in investing into this model. In fact, they did invest eventually. The other thing I found out since then was that, I don't know if you knew, but Korea is number 4 in the world in terms of patent filing. Now, a lot of that is done by Samsung and LG and big companies, but it's a very high number, and number 6 in terms of IP protection filing. And when I started getting to the world of the medical device and related diagnostic tools and such, I was just flabbergasted at how many great products exist in Korea. Not only at startups, but these IPs and ideas reside in KAIST, post-tech, academia. It's just amazing stuff. And I'm not saying this because I'm not an expert. When I talked to Jeff and others in the US, they were also very surprised as well. The problem that I'm seeing is that a lot of the Korean companies have wonderful products, and many of them actually are even well-funded. But when they start thinking about having to go to the US, a lot of the companies that I found is really hoping to introduce the product, get the approval, and if it goes well, then hopefully a device company might buy it or might be able to sell it. I think if you're very lucky, and if out of 100, maybe that can happen to less than 5. Let's say out of 100, you might have 1 unicorn, maybe 2. The remaining 5 might be lucky enough to get funded just by a product themselves, but a vast majority do not have that luxury. And my argument is whether you decide to go IPO, whether you decide to sell to a company, or whether you decide to run the business itself, there's an initial process that's very critical, which is really getting the commercial plan in order. Because unless you have that, you will not be able to really attract the best investors. And unless you plan for that, you certainly will not be able to go and operate. And whether you're going to IPO, you're going to require the same things. And this is where a lot of the startups fall by wayside. And I find a lot of the VCs or funds, as much as they want to support them, they cannot help in the US because they lack the network. Now, some of the startups can be lucky enough to be discovered by one of those closed-end funds. For example, Bain has a Bain Capital Fund, but they have all the capabilities to help a startup from A to Z, in commercializing. But a lot of the startups don't have that luxury. And I don't even know a lot of the companies have an idea of what it will take. Peter, can you go to the key criteria page here? It's the last page. Maybe Peter's not there. Okay, we can go to that later, but if you go to the States, you're gonna really have to understand not just your product, but really how is the IP landscape? Are you really well protected? Do you need to acquire some more so that you're not gonna get into some legal issues later on? If you're going to operate in the US, where are you gonna set up shop? Does it make sense in the East Coast or West Coast? You're gonna eventually have to partner with a clinic. Is Mayo better? Is Johns Hopkins better? Who's the right clinic? And who do you know in that clinic that can actually help you get started in this? How do you get the FDA approval? There's so many different ways you can go about what's the best way, what's the most efficient way. Once you get that, how do you get to market? How do you get access? How do you get qualified for insurance? Unless you have answers or vision for all of these, no matter what you do, whether you sell it, whether you IPO it, whether you run it on your own, you're going to have to understand that. And this is where I see a lot of startups really fall down. Now, a lot of startups do address these. And if you see the checklist, and I'm sure most of you have addressed a lot of these, but also they tend to do it in a very haphazard way, very independently. I have seen many startups go to a law firm that specializes in IP in Korea, another firm that specializes in FDA approval, another firm trying to link with distributors and such. And if you don't do it under one roof, it just becomes very, very time consuming and inefficient. And I have not yet found to date one company in the US under one roof that does this. And this is the reason why I got involved, and I'm trying to help IX create a new business model We're not quite there yet. What we'd like to have is eventually create our own discretionary fund, or partner with a VC who might dedicate a fund, not a big one, that can actually dedicate to startups in this space. If we can have that going, we should be able to help a lot of startups, especially Korean startups, from A to Z, not only in funding, but really hand-holding all the way through the process. So that's the model we're trying to do. And again, this is not a session to say use IX, or this is not a sales. This is what our model is, where we're going, and we have some learnings from that, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you. So let me stop there, and I am not a specialist in this area. So let me kind of open up to Jeff, and maybe Jeff, you can talk a little bit more detail about the challenges that you've seen that a lot of the companies on this side may not really foresee beforehand, and your experience with that. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think that there's several factors that come into play, and one is sort of the familiarity with the one's own market, but the unfamiliarity with another market like the US. They're just two separate ecosystems completely, you know. And I would say that the IP landscape is very different. The regulatory landscape is completely different. A lot of the so the reimbursement, modes of reimbursement, and who the payers are vastly different. So unless you have an understanding of how the different markets function, then you cannot apply the same standards. It would be like saying, well, we have a startup here in the US, let's take it over to Korea and see if it works the same way, and it's very different. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is just like the importance of having boots on the ground really is you can't overestimate that. Like having people and allies and partners on the ground that can help you to grow incrementally and then ultimately scale is very, very important. I think that that's something that's not recognized by a lot of people with respect to your ability to come here to the States and be able to start up a company and expect that you're going to have a lot of successes along the way. Andy and I have seen plenty of companies, specifically medical device companies, come over here from Korea under the assumption that they're going to have the same, that they're going to experience the same success that they had in Korea. When they come here, they come to a very rude awakening. And a lot of times it's because they don't understand sort of the importance of having partners here in the US that understand the regulatory, that understand how IP functions here differently than it does in Korea, and then understanding how the healthcare systems work here. It's very, very different, you know. So having that access to those partners is very, very important.
By the way, let me mention here, this is not about having access to an association with loosely connected experts where you can just get an advisor to it. This is really getting to the nitty gritty. And that's daunting. You might have an association that's willing to help, but if you're here, you know, you have to navigate through all of this. It's really, really a daunting process.
Yeah, I would say, you know, like the typical numbers within startups is like 5 or 10% of startups get to a successful exit, you know, and so it's hard enough trying to make a startup successful, but then if you come to a completely different ecosystem and you don't understand the rules of engagement, that's where I think having a partner where you could go for one-stop shopping and you can go get expertise in legal, IP, financing, strategy, marketing, regulatory, all those things sort of under one roof. I think that's where we confer an advantage, a competitive advantage to many of the portfolio companies as well as clients that work with us. Tom, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, let me stop here. This is meant to be kind of an open dialogue discussion. Let me stop here before we go through a case with Andy. Does this ring with some of you? Give us some feedback. Maybe one or two of you can tell us, some of the challenges you faced. Any volunteers?
Hello, I'm Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the CEO of OST, and we started off in Korea, and we did incorporate it in America around 2018. And we definitely saw the difficulty how, from Korean startup perspective, the three barriers that I faced was definitely the language, the culture, and the market itself. Because our business model was so, because it was based on Asian market, all the marketing, the branding itself, and the wording that we were using. As soon as we launched our Kickstarter in United States, we saw a huge different reaction from the people. They were confused with the wording that we were using, and some of the images that we were using for the landing page was a bit off too. So I thought it's definitely the challenge as a Korean startup to learn the culture there.
Yeah.
And the other stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else with some of the challenges you faced? It'd be really helpful to know and confirm.
Hello. Hi,
Hi.
I'm
Hi.
Giovanni.
Hi.
It's the same name as the yogurt. So I'm working as a corporate strategy and investor relations at AI Tricks. And then the problem that we're facing is we really want to go into the US market, but we're not sure if we should set up an office because we have to pay like double tax and everything. So we can really decide if we should like satellite office or like HQ or like even flipping our HQ there. So, how do you make those kind of decisions?
Giovanni, that's a really good point. That's such a difficult decision to make, because of the fact that you're exactly right. You double not only the taxes but the expenses. Like you have two separate offices with two separate leases with two separate employee bases. I mean, those expenses add up very quickly. I can tell you one thing that, and I'm going to just be really honest about this. I'll be very frank. Like in the US market, like Korea doesn't even register on the radar, barely, like in the medical device market, typically you have several tiers. The upper tier is really the US, obviously, is the top of that tier, but also then you have the EU. So EU is kind of considered to be a colleague sort of marketplace where we do try to take our products and services to their networks, and then Japan is actually up there as well, and it's also because the reimbursements that we see is relatively equivalent in those marketplaces. The second tier, then you get to marketplaces like maybe Australia or Canada, and then maybe China is starting to edge their way up there a little bit just because of the size of their market is so large. Not price based, but the volume that you see there is so large that you pretty much have to play there if you want to play internationally. And then I would say that South Korea is sort of on that next tier, And so what some of the things that startups don't understand is that, like, if you try to come here with that perception that the American consumers have with respect to products that come out of Korea, and I'm not talking about electronics, right? Like, so in automotive and electronics, Korea has done a great job over the last few decades of changing that branding, and quality. Whereas in the life sciences and even tech, they're not there yet, Like I would say technology is next, right? And even companies coming out of tech companies coming out of Korea are still considered kind of, second or third tier. Like, just, you look at these big companies like Kakao Talk. People in the US don't even know what Kakao Talk is. They have no idea what it is. And they probably, if they find out about it, they think it's a knockoff of other companies here in the US, right? And so you just have to kind of understand that. So just think in those terms. And then life sciences and healthcare is even behind that. So that even like companies here in the US, like premier companies like Strykers, Medtronics, J&J in the medical device space, Pfizer's in pharma, Genentech in biotech, they wouldn't even consider going to Korea. So then when these Korean companies then try to come here and try to compete, it's just, you can't do it. I mean, people won't accept it. The only way to do it is to come here strategically,
Mhm.
be based here, have a partner here that understands how to navigate, and then appear as though that you are a US based company. And that's how you succeed.
I mean, we have a partnership with Cleveland Clinic.
Great, great. I did my
Yeah.
training at Cleveland, Yeah.
Oh,
Cleveland Clinic,
really?
fantastic,
Oh,
yeah. I did my
oh,
residency at Case Western, which is affiliated with
that's
the clinic,
cool.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so that's why we are like, so we've been like partnered for about like 2 years. That's why we want to enter the US market next year, because that's when we are done with the validation, like product validation.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're just not sure if we should like set up an office there or like just travel from Korea office. Like, is it worth
Okay.
to set up an office there?
Okay. Okay. Why don't I intervene here? By the way, I think Jeff or Andy, or I'd be happy to talk to any of you individually, separately. And again, this would be just sharing experience, and don't see it as a sales pitch. This is not why we're
Yeah.
doing this. Be happy to
Mhm.
spend some time and give you some thoughts. So please connect with Peter, and then contact us. We'll be happy to do that. And this is my passion. I mean, this is what I want to do. I want to really help very promising Korean companies really succeed. Then it would be a win for Korea. It would be a win for the startup. It would be a win for the fund. It would be a win for everybody. And that is my
Yeah.
personal goal. So this is why I've decided to really get involved personally. So with that, let me switch over to Andy's story. As you know, Andy said he was one of the founding founders. Oh, by the way, within IX, there are two other partners who are not here. One is an IP specialist, and the other one is a legal counsel who works in the VC space for many, many years. So they were very smart in putting the right group of partners together. So Andy, I'll let him tell the story that involved with Amplify many years ago. And in fact, what he's doing is he's taken the idea. They have taken the idea and they have actually made a company into it. And Andy is now serving as the interim CEO in the US on behalf of Amplify. And Andy, you will come back, I hope. But he will tell you what he's achieved to date, and why he had to get involved in that. So with that, Andy, maybe you can take them through your case study and also tell them about the challenges that you had to overcome and how you overcame them.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thing is, once I get into this, it can be a long conversation. So I'm going to try to really make this straight to the point. To give you some context of what Amplify is all about, let me see if I can just show you a quick video of the device that the company is based off of. And then and I won't talk too much about the product, and I will just sort of go right into the into my experience at Amplify. So let me just share my screen real quick. Let me see. Okay. All right, so here's a video. So it's a spinal implant, and Dr. Jeffrey Raw is one of our co-founders at Amplify, and he's a spine surgeon. And spine surgery is actually something that Koreans are very successful at. A lot of you guys don't know probably, but spine surgery is one of the more well practiced, and it's a very, I wouldn't say popular is a bad word, but it's a very well practiced discipline throughout the world. A lot of people have back pain and neck pain and so forth. And interestingly, I mean, of course, there's a lot of great surgeons throughout the world, but there's a lot of concentration of great surgeons in Korea. Some of the notable original godfathers of spine, if you will, really came from Korea back in the 80s and 90s. And if you look at some of the top notch spine surgeons, and spine surgery is at the league of neurosurgery and orthopedic surgery. It is the top echelon discipline in the medical space, right? And you'll see a lot of great, successful Korean American surgeons like Dr. Rowe at major institutions like Harvard, Stanford. If you look at every major academic institutions, you'll see a Korean American name as one of the professors and researchers and practitioners of spine. So henceforth, the reason why we've gotten into this area, and spine device alone it represents about 15 to 20 billion dollars in actual market potential in the U.S. alone, and worldwide spine hardware is about 35-40 billion dollars. That's just hardware. If you start adding equipment, hardware meaning like implants, right? That actually goes into people's bodies. If you start adding biologics and the peripheral devices, the number jumps up. So it's a very big space. The space that Amplify plays into is in that implant space. And this device alone has a potential for about $2 billion in the US alone. So it's an inner body device, what we call that helps with spinal fusion. It's an expandable device, much like a heart stent. It goes in really tiny, minimally invasively, and then expands into shape when it gets to that disc space area. You'll see quickly how that looks like in a clinical setting. So a spine surgeon would insert this device into that disc space where it's diseased. He will clear out all the diseased materials and will place it with this device that goes in very, again, minimally invasively, but expands into its full size inside the safety of its disc space, and then apply biologics and other sort of medical treatment components to heal that area effectively. So the company was founded roughly about 4 years ago. And again, there's some Korean ties. One of the reasons why I went to go visit Korea and meeting Tom was sort of a side note. The main purpose for the visit was to meet one of the founding members of Amplify. So 4 spine Jedi Knights, like these very famous surgeons from Korea, learned about IntuitiveX and reached out to me and Jeff, saying that they have all this great IP and this methods and technology, but they understand that Korean space is small and it's not really going anywhere. So they wanted to just jump the process and come straight to the US, and really wanted to kind of get our help in actualizing and productizing and commercializing their ideas in the US first. Oftentimes, I see a lot of Asian entrepreneurs starting smaller in the Asian space, starting in Korea, maybe going to China, and then coming to the US. But one thing I would like to kind of mention is that there's no reason why you have to take that step, right? Coming straight to US oftentimes actually makes a lot more sense than kind of doing that baby step. So these surgeons, whether they knew it or not, they chose that method, and the rest is history. We love their IP. Jeff and I, obviously, we know the space very well. So we love their IP, we love their sort of credentials that they brought to the table. And then we quickly set up a company around it, just sort of a skeleton structure around it. And then what was pivotal for us was just their IP alone wasn't very commercializable, right? It had great clinical impact, but as you guys probably know, business plan is more important than the idea, right? You gotta make money, right? So, one thing that you guys probably all know, it's probably cliche by now, but one of the biggest mistakes a lot of early stage entrepreneurs make is that they think the idea by itself is like, wow, of course everyone would want this. This solves a great problem, but if it doesn't make money, right, it doesn't make sense. And oftentimes they think that, well, the money part will come later, right? Of course, the money part's gonna sort of happen somehow, right? And the PhDs and I'm an engineer myself, right? As long as the product is great, we'll figure out the business side of it later, right? That's the biggest mistake anyone can make. And like anyone else, these surgeons, no offense, but they didn't have that mindset. So at least Steph and I, Dr. Rowe and I, we knew that it had a lot of potential, but for it to have its leg to stand on, we needed something that can make money, which is implants, right? Which is more of the device itself. So we went out and scoured the IP area and actually through IntuitiveX's connection, we found this IP, this this technology that was available for us to purchase. So we brought that IP along with the IP from Korea, set up a company around it, raised money from surgeons like Tom's brother-in-law who knows the space, right? That's another sort of know-how that we have, is that we want strategic investors, like early on seed investors, not just for what we call dumb money, no offense, but we want smart money earlier on so that these guys would be invested not only with their money, but also with their insights. And later on, they end up becoming promoters, marketers, and users, right? Revenue bearing entities later on. So it's got sort of a trifecta element around it, right? So we raised some money. With that money, we purchased this IP from this US entity. And then, with my sort of, it was a relatively, I would say, more straightforward for me because I have, 10, 20 years of industry experience in the US. But, toughest part for anyone, whether you're from Korea or Asia or entrepreneurs starting from here, really is just kind of going through that step, right? You got to really, like anything else, you don't want to sort of bypass or try to fast forward these steps. And these steps in any actualization of an idea to a product is, it starts with IP. IP is so, again, I can't speak outside of devices, but within devices, it's a very litigated industry, okay? It's heavily litigated. So, there's $1 billion worth of money being exchanged over litigations every year because of devices, right? Don't have the proper IP, they commercialize. And there's some notable examples where companies would go and, oh, fine, IP, we're okay, let's just start selling. And they make about $500 million in revenue. And that's when the trolls come out, right? All right, now that you have made money, you're infringing on my IP, you owe us 20% of that, right? So that happens quite often. So for that reason, getting the right IP lawyer, I can't emphasize enough how important, this is coming from an engineer, not an IP lawyer, okay? How important finding the right IP partner. Anyone with an IP law degree can write you up an application. It's not easy, it's not hard, right? Okay, what's your idea? Let's just form a whatever. But just like anything else, strategy is so much more important than the actual work itself. And that's one thing I realized, again, very understandably, right? A lot of Asians and overseas IP attorneys, as much as they're experienced and they know IP law, they're not experienced here to know the 요령, if you will, right? The actual sort of strategical sense to form an IP in a way that will be a lot more strategically. So those things are learned through experience, not taught by reading books, right? So, first thing that we did really well was very risky because it cost a lot of money to do so, was to partner up with one of the best IP firms in the country, Perkins Coie, only mainly because I've experienced with them directly through Stryker. They knew who I was, they knew who Jeff was, and they were willing to take sort of a risk with us, in terms of partnering with a non-revenue bearing startup already, and so on and so forth, right? So finding the right IP partnership, not attorney, but a partnership is there's a business component to the IP, there's a strategic component to the IP, as well as there's the actual content of what you can. So we did that really well. And we were able to acquire the right IP, found out that that IP wasn't 100%. So we went out and bought more IP from some cancer institute way out there in Florida. Who would expect that a cancer institute would have some IP that would be very relevant to us? But we did that from a defensive standpoint. Again, that's strategy, right? You got to think a couple of years ahead. And when we are commercializing, it's not about just what you have, but you want to have something that can kind of block others from getting in, or from big companies from buying IP just to block me, right, from commercializing. A lot of that stuff is something that, overseas IP attorneys really can't tell you, those strategy that is developed from just experience, right? And then next thing I did was to partner up with a development company, right? So, Amplify, although we were valued at about 40 to 50 million at the Series A part of it, up to that Series A part, we literally had 2-3 employees total. So that's the whole incubator mindset, is that you don't have to hire people and do everything until you have some sort of a need for it. Everything can be outsourced in the US, and you want to do that. Why bring on overhead when we don't have to and when things are risky, right? So we went on, and that's the IntuitiveX way, and it's sort of the Andy Choi way to an extent. So we went on and we partnered with another engineering and testing company to finish out the testing, the development aspects of this device, went through all the right testing, and then we partner up with the right regulatory company. That's the next big hurdle. Again, just like IP, right? Regulatory, it's not a textbook. You would think that FDA should be, you just follow the rules, right? Just here's the rule for a 510K device for this particular category. Here's all the rules on what to test. You would think it would be straightforward, and it is somewhat straightforward. But in the end, you know who reviews and approves your product? It's an individual, and it's always never clean cut. Okay, because even though the value of testing could be somewhat very straightforward, like you got to pass testing. Well, how do you set up your test? What do you test, right? What is your worst case scenario that you test? Do you test everything, or do you just test one device that will represent the entire portfolio of your product? All that stuff is subjective, and you have to negotiate with the reviewer for them to agree that my testing is going to be good enough. So if you just follow the rules and you end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and spend 2 years of testing everything, when you, as opposed to if you had the right sort of relationships and know the right ins and outs to negotiate with the FDA approver, you end up testing only one device and it takes 3 months. And that's what we did. We were able to partner up with the right FDA regulatory consultants who had basically ins with the approver. We already knew who the approvers were going to be. That's another thing that you would never know if you're in the OUS, but if you go to the right regulatory consultants, they're based in DC, they have offices right next to the FDA office, and they're having relationships, right? It's like lobbyists basically. So, they will know, okay, so-and-so is going to review your product, and we're going to basically talk to them, have meetings with them. So instead of spending, I was able to get FDA approval for 3 different products with testing one device, where the textbook says you have to test all 3 and 4 or 5 different variations of each. And that would have taken us 2 years and probably about $500,000 to test all of it. And that's what usually Korean companies do because they don't know any better. They do it and they get FDA approval, but we were able to sort of bypass all that because we partner up with the right consultants and partners, just like IP attorneys, right? So we were able to get FDA approval within 120 days, as opposed to about 2 to 3 year timeframe that would have taken us for all 3 products. And the last thing I'm going to say, there's a lot more, obviously, right? And then once you get FDA approval, then there's quality, there's infrastructure, all the stuff that can be hurdles. But since we don't have that much time, the biggest barrier, even for us right now, it becomes a barrier for us, is once you get FDA approval, commercializing. Well, commercialization, that's where most international companies fail, because in the US, it is very complicated. It is somewhat, I wouldn't say screwed up, it's broken, it's right, but it's broken to an extent where it's favorable for guys who know how to sort of navigate through it, right? So 2 things I would mention. You have FDA approval product, it's great, product's great, it works really well. Again, all approved, but every hospital who is going to be, again, I'm talking from device standpoint, right? Surgeons are the ones who are deciding to want to use it. I want to use it for my patient. But the ones who are paying for this device are the hospitals. So, it's a very interesting dynamic, business dynamics, is that the decision maker aren't the payers, right? So for a long time, surgeons had a lot of power, so they didn't have to wait too long. And usually hospitals would just go in and approve and let surgeons use whatever they want. But now, because of health economics and efficiency, hospitals are starting to push back a lot. So, if I want this product to be approved and get used by Dr. Rowe in Seattle, it goes through a different process versus a hospital in Arizona, hospital in New York. There are thousands of hospitals in the US, you can imagine, and every individual hospital has their own process. So you can imagine how complicated how laborious and how tedious and annoying that can be. It does make things a little easier if you're applying for a certain what we call GPO. So not every hospital is all individualized, right? But now these days, a lot of hospitals are systematized. So they belong to a group. So they group each other up. They become a network. So maybe you guys heard like Kaiser is like one of those group networks, right? So if I want to get into this group, then I got to go through this huge group purchasing organization's approval process, which could take months, if not years. But if I'm in, then I'm in at the entire hospital system, like 5,500, 200 hospital systems. That is, I don't have too much time right now to get into how you navigate that, but that you do it with partnerships too, and that is still probably the toughest thing for any small device companies in the U.S., whether you're U.S. or big, small, whatever it may be, right? The other thing is distribution. Okay. Again, it would be great to just put it on Amazon and every surgeon who wants to use it just go click and then you buy it, right? No, even if the surgeons want to use it, the distribution for that local area could be different than the ones that are just up the road. One surgeon could have one distribution. You could have 5 surgeons over here that is represented by one distribution. So every state, every region, every locale, again, right? That's one thing good about Korea is that everything is sort of like just one, right? It's a socialized sort of system. So it may be hard to get in or hard to sort of enter in, but once you're in, you're sort of, right, kind of approved and be able to sort of partner quite easily. But here, if you don't have the right relationships, right connections, the right sort of partnerships again, so I know I use that word quite a bit, if you have the right partnership, then it's very difficult to sort of get into that distribution model that is very, very unique and different for every state, every city. In LA, there's about, I would say, 100 different spine surgeons. There's 200 different distributors that represent 100 spine surgeons. So imagine the kind of, the kind of sort of complexity that comes with dealing with. So right now we're doing really well, but if you ask, what do I do every single day? I manage hospital approvals and I manage distributors. Not so much surgeons. I manage distributors, agents, hospital approvals, and then when I have time left over, I try to market and meet with surgeons. In the end, because we're here where we are, surgeons thankfully love our product, but the barrier for us is really, again, that distribution, complexity, and the hospital approval. So my job as a CEO right now is on a daily basis trying to remove that hurdle, right? So that our product can sort of flow through the distribution system, the channel, and the hospital to get to the surgeon so they can use it on patients. All right, I know I said a lot, but hopefully that makes some sense. Any questions?
Before we do that, I think Jeff's going to get off the phone. So with 2 minutes, maybe there's some questions right here. Jeff, I don't know if you have access to the questions.
Yeah. So let me.
Are there some things you might want to comment?
Because I think the other ones were for Andy.
Yeah.
So the question has to do with in the US and EU, how do you penetrate hospitals with liquid biopsy service with regulatory hurdles for medical diagnostics? Interestingly, a Korean company that Tom referred to us is a client of ours that we're currently working with. They're in the liquid biopsy space as well. So, I'll just keep it very broad overview, nothing specific here. But it goes back to what we were saying before. You have to have a deep understanding of the ecosystem, and you have to have an understanding of how to penetrate the hospital systems and who actually are the gatekeepers within those hospitals, as Andy just mentioned. And you have to know who sort of holds the purse, right? Holds the purse to determine who gets to have access to the contracts. And as Andy mentioned, oftentimes it's a person, or in most cases it's actually a committee. So I actually sit on a committee for both new technology and biologics at our hospital system. So my hospital is Swedish hospital in Seattle, and it's the largest nonprofit health system in Seattle, but it's part of the third largest hospital system in the U.S. nonprofit called Providence. And oftentimes what will end up happening is new products come to our committee, and then we evaluate the science behind it to make sure that there's scientific validity. We make sure that there's good IP oftentimes, but more so than that, we actually take a look at FDA approval. It has to be FDA approved. It has got to be a market, and there's got to be demand from the physician. So there typically has to be a physician champion or champions who take that idea and say, we want this. This will benefit our patients. And again, it goes back to that same sort of what we talked about earlier. You have to have the connection. You've got to have boots on the ground. You can't do it independently. It's virtually impossible to do it independently. And so it does take a partnership with people who understand the regulatory hurdles, the hospital approval hurdles, and everything that sort of comes with that. So in a nutshell, it requires a village of people in order to bring a product to service or service to a hospital, and I think Andy's done an amazing job of getting approvals. I think at this point, Andy, we have about over 20 or 30 hospital systems that are sort of have approval for Amplify. So it does take expertise in knowing where those networks are. So on that note, I do have to sign out. I'll let Andy and Tom take the rest of this. And I told Tom and Andy about this on Kakao, but it's actually my wife's birthday today, so I have to run over to make sure that I'm not in the doghouse.
Go. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. Peter, we'll talk soon. If any of you are Peter, Chobani, I think, who else was it? Was it
Eric, I think.
Eric, yeah. Any one of you guys, if you guys are back in the Seattle area, look me up, and we'll once this COVID thing's all over, we'll go out for some drinks and some dinner. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for your time, Jeff. Yeah. Happy birthday to your wife.
Okay.
Happy
Sounds good.
birthday.
Okay. By the way, I can stay on for like 5-10 more minutes. So if you need to go. And we can just start wrapping up. Before we address a couple other questions, Andy, can you tell the group a little bit about where Amplify is now, how big it's gotten, how many patients have actually received this, so they have a sense, and when you're gonna sell?
That's the big question, right? So our goal is to get acquired. I think if we weren't for COVID, we could have been already sold by now. To be honest with you, we had some real interest from some big companies like Medtronic, Stryker, and so forth early this year, but everything sort of stayed or paused. We're the only one of the few companies that actually grew during COVID. April was bad for everyone in the industry this year, but it started coming back pretty quickly for us. Not so much because the case came back, we just started expanding, right? So our usual users, surgeon users, are still about 50-60% at capacity, right? So if we didn't grow, our business would be 50% of before COVID, but we've been growing 20% every month, even with this downturn, because we're sort of expanding into other states, other accounts, and so forth. So we didn't really start our launch until about October of last year. So it's pretty recent. Even though we got FDA approval late 2018, we stayed in the alpha beta stage, right? So it's a medical device. So we stayed sort of, we were very careful about it. So we only launched in a very small set of locations. And then we stayed in that mode for about good 6 to 9 months, so we can get all the bugs out, upgrade our system, work at our instrumentation, yada, yada, yada. So within about, once we launched, nationally, and again, we couldn't really launch nationally because of the hospital approval. So it took us about good 6-8 months to get into our first national system. And first one was actually not Seattle, I wish, not Providence, but it was NYU. So NYU Langone Hospital System was the first big system that we got into. And then right away, we did like 100+ cases within about a month or two in October, November. And then we kept on going. If we weren't for COVID, we would have been probably like around 1,500 surgeries. That equates to about 7 or 8, almost $10 million in revenue. So as a startup, right, we would have done 10 millions in the first year, which would have been really, really good. We'll probably end up doing about $5 or $6 million this year, again, because of COVID. But we're going to approach 1,000th case, and 1,000 is sort of like that magic number for a lot of the bigger companies that want to just sort of acquire and plug in. A lot of the bugs and all the issues that come about get sort of assessed and realized in the first few hundred cases. So when you're about 1,000, you're sort of on a coasting from a performance standpoint, right? So with that, and because of COVID sort of waning down, not number wise, but at least the perception wise, we are getting a lot more interest from big companies, as of now, actually. And we just had 2 big meetings with some of the big strategics. And if that goes really well, we're looking at an exit as early as maybe end of next year. Even if the offer comes in and LOI comes in, the due diligence and the process takes about good 6 to 9 months. So we're in the best case, Q1, we'll get an LOI, and then we'll get an acquisition completed by end of next year. If not, we're ready to go at least one to 2 more years to get into some of the OUS areas and really maximize our potential here in the US.
Yeah. So thanks, Andy. Let me just wrap up by saying, I think we can talk for hours. If you really want to get details, there's lots of stuff, but you can kind of get the feel for the challenges. And many of you may have already faced this, or some of you will be facing this. And one of the points I want to make is whether you plan to get acquired or IPO or run it, you need to have a commercialization plan, because at the end, the person buying, the company buying you, is going to want to know that, and that's going to impact the value, whether they're going to do it or if you have everything set up. So it doesn't matter which path you go. The best way to efficiently and maximize the value of a company is all the basics that we just talked about. And this is the biggest challenge that we see Korean firms having. And what we're trying to do is set up a structure where we can really help startups, not only in Korea, but in Asia, really handle them, including funding them, and take them all the way to the commercialization process. That is my mission over the next few years. So let me stop there. I know there were a couple of questions on FDA approvals and so forth. Why don't we leave it open for 1 or 2 questions that Andy or I can answer, if there's still curiosity on your part. No?
Well, one of the things that I was wondering, and just on behalf of, I think some of the conversations I've had with some of the startups is, what kind of, I know this varies greatly depending on the product and service and so on, but Andy, what's been your experience in how long or how difficult it is to get into a hospital system for sales? I mean, you said you got into NYU and working with a dozen or so of different hospitals and so on. Is this like 6 months? Is it years? Is it how long does it, what is involved in that?
Typically, it's about 2 to 4 months process. Some of the bigger systems like Providence, it took us over 9 months, and only because of scheduling and things like. I think we could have done it quicker if kind of luck went our way. But the process is, so 2 things to think about. One is you need a champion, right? You can't just go in there and hey, knock on the door, can I get approved? You need a user, you need a spine surgeon who can really go to bat for you and become an applicant, right? I want to use this, and he has to fill out the forms, he has to go to the committee meetings and all that. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort for a surgeon to do it so he can use a product. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is to find somebody who can really buy into it, and willing to spend the time and the effort in that course of few months. So that, that's the first challenge. The second challenge, is just kind of going through the process of the administrative challenges, right? The hospital's goal, and they're incentivized to deny you. There's not one system in the US where they're incentivized to bring you on board, right? So they're going to try to use every reason to delay the process. Sorry, my scheduling is not right. Oh, Dr. So-and-so is not available for this committee, this and that. So again, you need boots on the ground. Usually I do that with my local distributors, right? I incentivize them to literally go to the hospital. Hey, what's going on? How can I help you? Bring some coffee. Hey, can I get some? I mean, it sounds kind of bogus, but it comes down to that. It becomes, all about relationships and how learning about the decision makers, who happens to be a high school grad admin person, right? Who holds the calendar of the committee people, right? And if she can butter her up, then you can get in quicker, versus, oh, if not, then you're up for the next meeting. So it's really hard to give you a sort of a bite-sized answer. And I think that's one of the toughest things for really people who are in the industry, come and navigate those two things, right?
Yeah. It comes down to sales. You have to sell it. You don't just make it and just everybody buys it. It just doesn't happen. And you can't have a Korean national go and sell. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
You need access to that. It's very critical, right? And if you're going to sell to somebody, these are the things they're going to ask you. How are you going to monetize this? Whether you do it or somebody else, you need to have a vision for that. That's the way. Now, if you're lucky, product's so great, they already have all the distribution, they can just take it. That could work, but they're not going to pay you full value for that, right?
Right.
So, I don't want to throw water, but this is just the reality of a lot of startups face, and it's quite daunting. And what I can suggest is, we're open to just give us a call. We'd be happy to discuss. And, if we get to a point where we can actually do business, that's fine. We can maybe refer you to somebody else. It's just something that we really feel this is a very, very critical area if we want more Korean startups to really succeed in the US. And I will continue to focus on doing that. And so anybody want to chat or discuss further, just feel free to reach out.
But I'll leave you one motivating factor. There's a reason why, even with all the challenges, why guys like me still go back in the industry and then, for Koreans or Chinese or Asian companies that still want to come here, our device will get about $800 tops in South Korea. Okay, that's the price we'll get. That's one reason why we're not in there, but $800. That's pretty common throughout Asia, China, wherever you go. Our device happens to be pretty sort of innovative, and it costs a lot to make, but in that same category, you can make a very cheap, dumb device, if you will, for the same application. $20 to make, sell for $300. That's a lot of money, right? That same $20 device that costs, not mine, right, but other device, you can sell that for $3,000 here in the US, right? Minimum, if not $4,000. My device gets about $6,000 to $10,000 versus maybe I'll get $900 to $1,000 in Korea, right? So when small companies, and there are smaller Korean device companies here doing well enough, right? And they still come after years of sort of, I guess, failing and kind of doing that, because they realize that if they had just 4 or 5 surgeons, right? We have 4,000 spine surgeons here in the US, but if you have just like 2 or 3 surgeons that gives you business on a consistent basis, that's actually enough, because the pricing is so high. You sell 1 device to 1 surgeon here, it's like selling 10 in Korea, right? So, it's difficult. It's not impossible. It's definitely doable if you have the right partnerships, right? And if you do it right, and if you do it well enough, it's very rewarding, and it's the financial sort of payout is huge, not just from a revenue standpoint, but from the acquisition, exit, and so on and so forth. So don't get too discouraged. I don't want to live on a bad note, right? There's still plenty of opportunities and great people like Tom and other people that you guys can get help from to crack the market. It's done before, right? I've done it, so you guys could all do it too.
Okay.
Well, great.
Okay.
Thanks for that. Any final notes, Tom, before we wrap up here?
No, other than, I'll tell you, it's really exciting to see all of you. It's just, I know how many years you probably put your life, sweat, and tears onto this. And, I know you believe in the product, and I just wish everybody the best of luck. And any help you can get, reach out, be open-minded, because US is a very, very different market and you will need help, and try to identify. If you can't, just reach out to me or Andy or Jeff. We'll help you. We'll try to help you in any way we can.
Great. Thank you very much for the session, gentlemen. After this, I will email to everyone and share contact information and a video of this session for review. I mean, there's a lot of great pieces there, and some of the notes from the presentation that we had that you can just sort of review, like the key checklist and so on. So feel free to contact me or Andy, Tom, or Jeff if you have any other questions or anything else you want to discuss. And we will definitely try to help best we can. So thank you very much for your time, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks everybody. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.